Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the REDX podcast. My name is Andrew, and I am super excited for today's guest. He is an industry leader, a coach. He's got 25 years in the business. He's a major real estate speaker. He's been on the show before. Please welcome back Mark Leader. Mark, how you doing today, my man?
I'm doing great, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Like I said, we're excited to have you on today. We're going to dive into some amazing kind of training content and a great formula for success in real estate that we're going to get in depth on today. But before we get going, I just want to let our audience know. First off, welcome. If you're joining us live, please chime in the comments. Tell us where you're from. Say hi. If you're familiar with Mark and some of his training, give him a shout out. And as always, like and subscribe on YouTube and check us out on Facebook because we go live every Thursday and with other industry experts just like Mark. So we got that out of the way. Mark, let's get into it. Today, we are going to be talking about a guaranteed formula for real estate success. And we're going to get, I know that sounds really broad, but we're going to get into some really good nitty gritty stuff about understanding some of the differences and different approaches in real estate, in lead generation, in being a listing agent. But to start, Mark, I want to just let the audience get to know you a little bit better. I gave you a super short intro. Will you give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, how you got into real estate, and how long you've been in the industry here?
I will, Andrew. Thank you very much. Um,
Awesome.
yeah,
Thank
the
you.
intro wasn't the longest, but it wasn't the shortest one I've ever heard either. So it was a good intro. I've actually been in the business now 40 years, 39 years, 39 years, something like that.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
for the first 10 years, I was a salesperson. And I was actually with Century 21 in those days. And I think at the age of 25 to be put into their Worldwide Hall of Fame. I think that's a record that still stands today. I'm not sure. At the same time, I bought the real estate company that I was working at the age of 21. Had 3 salespeople. We built that up to 65 salespeople and sold that
Wow.
with the mortgage brokerage and property management division and all of that. And then that's when I was recruited into the training business by a gentleman in those
Okay.
days by the name of Floyd Wickman. And I worked with Floyd for 5 years.
I'm
And
familiar with
then,
Floyd. All right.
yeah, yeah, I was blessed. I had a great relationship with Floyd. I've had a great relationship with a lot of the legends. Bob
Mm,
Proctor, God bless his soul, he passed last year, but I can tell you he was a personal friend of mine and had a lot to do with the training program I wrote in those days called Leader's Choice. He actually endorsed it. Um, Knew Floyd
nice.
well. Shared the stage when I was much younger with Mike Ferry. I had dinner with a couple of times with Zig Ziglar. Really, really smart. Daniel Kennedy, who was a great speaker. She now works in Hollywood as an actress. So it's been a great ride, and I've
Oh,
had the
nice. Okay.
opportunity to work with some really cool people, including REDX. I was a big supporter of REDX right from almost the first day you guys opened, and it's been a great relationship, and you guys are a great company to work with. So when you asked me to do this, you didn't have to ask me twice. Anything I can do for REDX, I'm a big believer in you guys.
Awesome, Mark. Well, thank you very much for that endorsement, and thank you for a little bit of background there. Very impressive career in real estate, and so I know that we're going to get some good advice and some good kind of real estate coaching from you today, in the 20 or 30 minutes we have here. So let's kind of dive in. Can you kind of help me unpack and understand some of the different approaches that agents take? I know a lot of agents use kind of a passive approach. Some people are really proactive. I think some people go as far as being hyperactive, right? So let's kind of unpack each of those and kind of help agents figure out which approach might best suit their business, how they can figure that out, and maybe what your favorite approach is and how you recommend or coach agents to work.
Right. Well, you know, Andrew, um, if I've heard this once, I've heard it 1,000 times. You know,
Okay.
Mark, thanks for taking the complicated and making it simple. And one of
Okay.
the things that I've always witnessed in the real estate industry, that a lot of people want to make it a lot more complicated than what it needs to be. And not only in not only the realtors themselves, but I would put a lot of that blame with the coaching and training industry that caters to the real estate industry. You know, they
Okay.
tend to want to make it complicated, and you know, real estate's really not a complicated business um,
Mm.
in order to be successful. And in fact, you know, I've often said that if you want to use an example of a business that became hugely successful by taking the complicated and making it simple, it was a gentleman by the name of Ray Kroc. Bought a
Mm.
little restaurant. And you know, if you know anything about the restaurant business, you know, there's people that have gone to college and university to be in that type of business, and culinary schools, or whatever they may be called, and come out, and they borrow some money and they open something, let's say rather simple, a hamburger place, and they're in business for about 2, 3 years, and they're out. And and then you have this fellow Ray Kroc comes along, and he builds this system, and literally builds the world's greatest restaurant chain and probably franchise system in the world, and that was McDonald's.
Oh, okay.
And he did it on the backs of 14-year-olds. Now,
Mm.
I'm sure there's a lot more to it than this, but if you look at what he did, he took the complicated and made it simple.
Mm.
So if a 14-year-old can do it, then let's come up with a system that's that simple over and over and over again. And of course, anything you do over and over again, you're going to get better at it. So I found that if you take everything and you break it down almost to reduce it to the ridiculous, and then salespeople understand that, um, let the process, let the process. You know, for example, one of the things that I
Mm.
share with most audiences is there's a success formula in real estate, and
Right.
I guess you could say it's a guaranteed formula for success. But like most guarantees, you got to apply it, and if you don't apply it, it's not going to work for you.
Mm.
But you know, and there's three parts to this formula, and truthfully, when I was taught this formula, and I made it the foundation of almost everything I did in the listing and selling side of the real estate industry. Um, my career went from doing the first year in the business, I earned less than $9,000. And even going back in the 80s, that was a poverty level income. But once I
Mm.
learned this formula, and then I started to apply the formula. Now, remember when I say you make things, you take the complicated, make it easy, it doesn't mean that you still don't have to work. You still got to work hard,
Right.
but it's just the what you're doing is easier to understand. And the formula for
Mm.
success in the real estate industry, um, there's three parts to it. The first part is salespeople have to focus on bringing in one listing a week. We are in a listing business, and you know, there's 1,000 expressions that we've heard over the years. You got to list the last. Listings are the way to the top. Listings are the name of the game. You know, old realtors never die; they just become listless. um, but if you work on the math and that takes a second to catch that one. But if you work out the math and you figure, okay, if I brought in a listing a week for a year, that'd be 52 listings. Um, but let's assume that if you're doing that kind of business, you got to take some time off. So let's say you take a month off a year. Now, personally, my coaching students, I personally like them to work 3 weeks, 3 months on, 2 weeks off, 3 months on, 2 weeks off, because you have to be in your best mental and physical shape to be really great at this business. But it does take some work to get to that point. So you take a month off a year, let's say that's 48 listings. Now, if I said to you, all are going to sell, I'll have a credibility problem. But in this market, quite a few are going to sell because, as we all know, the one big challenge in the real estate market across North America, whether I'm speaking in Florida to California, from British Columbia to Ontario, it's almost the same market. Prices may be different, but it's the same challenge. The challenge is the inventory is low, and salespeople are having a hard time bringing in listings. Personally, I think that was always my favorite market, because I knew that I didn't have to build a team. All I had to do was bring in listings, and the whole real estate board was working for me because there was no inventory out there. But anyhow, so out of those 48, let's just assume half sell, and so you have 24 okay. deals that close, and let's just assume out of that 24, those people have sold their house, so they got to live somewhere. Let's just assume half of them buy from you again. So now you're at 36. And let's just assume that because you're a good guy, you're a good person, you're doing some of the other activities, you pick up 4 in your lap: community service, referrals, whatever. So we're at 24, 12 is 36, plus 4 is 40. And let's just assume for a second that the average commission is $8,000. So you take 40 transactions times it by $320,000. Now, of course, if you're maybe in the Toronto marketplace where the average sale price now is over $1 million, that number climbs substantially. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in Atlanta doing a 4-day workshop down there, and their average sale price is probably under $500. Let's say it is. So the end number will change based on your market. But the point is that if you focus on bringing in a listing a week, and you consider yourself, see, there has to be a paradigm shift. You got to think that, I'm not in the business of selling real estate, because that's what most people say. You're at a cocktail party, ask somebody, what do you do for a living? I sell real estate. No, what you got to think in your mind is that I list real estate for a living. That's what I do. Okay, that's how I make my living. I am a listing agent that specializes in getting the maximum amount of money for people for their house through proactive marketing activities. So there's a paradigm shift, because when you go through that paradigm shift, all of a sudden the hours that you work and how you direct your activities for that work changes, versus being a salesperson that'll sell anything. I focus on and I refer the other stuff out. So you bring in a listing a week, you're going to probably make yourself $250,000 or more a year. Part 2 to it is you got to learn to separate the looker from the buyer. Now, if you are an agent, you don't have to worry about this as much, because you've handled the transaction to sell their house. So you know how much money they're coming out with. So you're already ahead of the game. But let's assume that you work both sides and you have buyers that contact you. You've got to learn to separate the looker from the buyer, because if you don't, you end up driving people around the city, making no money. What do they call someone who puts people in the back of their car and drives them all over the city? What do they call them? Wheel estate agents, I think. I mean, even taxi drivers make more money than that. There was a fellow that I seen on one time. His name, I think, was Joe Girard, but don't hold me to that. And Joe was a realtor in San Francisco before he went on the speaking circuit. And I guess he wrote this program, and maybe you have to beep this out. I'm not sure, but he wrote a training program called "Either Buy From Me or Get the Hell Out of My Car." And the story he tells is that he was working in San Francisco, and he had these customers, and he took them out like for 4 or 5 Saturdays in a row. So finally, on the 5th Saturday, they're literally driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. And he says to the husband, why don't we stop at that little restaurant on the other side of the bridge, and we can we can have lunch. So the husband says, hey, Joe, let's stop up here. We got all afternoon. And the way he tells the story is he immediately stopped the car right in the middle of the Golden Gate Bridge, told the people, get the hell out of my car. And then he went back to the office and he wrote a training program, either buy from me or get the hell out of my car. So the point is, you got to learn to separate the looker from the buyer. Because if not, you're showing a lot of realtors get so excited. I've got somebody here. They get so excited that they just want to put them in the car and they're going to show them houses. But if they don't have any money to finance, we got a problem. So part one is bringing a listing a week. Part two is separate your looker from the buyer. And part three, when you are a listing agent, focus on selling your listings first. Focus on selling your in-house listings first. Now, I know there's a big push in the real estate industry about cooperation and all that, and I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong. But because I think, in order to be successful in this business, you have to have the type of personality that cooperates with other agents in the industry. But that's another talk for another day. We could do a talk on attitude when it comes to that. But the point is why I tell salespeople that take my programs is focus on selling your listings first. Well, obviously you get an opportunity to make some more money because you're going to pick up both sides. The second thing is that if you sell in-house listings, generally speaking, other realtors that work for your company are easier and more cooperative. They return calls quicker. Negotiations are easier. Closings are easier. So that's a formula for success. If salespeople follow that, bring in a listing each week, separate your looker from the buyer. Oh, and how do you separate the looker from the buyer? Well, a buyer's got three components, Andrew. They got to have money, they got to have motivation, and they got to have urgency. If they don't have money, motivation, and urgency, they're lookers, not buyers. So listing a week, separate your looker from the buyer, and show and sell your house, your listings first.
I love that. And with those three things that help you separate the looker from the buyer, at what point in your relationship with the potential buyer or the looker, at what point in getting to know them do you figure that out? Or what does that conversation look like to really hone in on it without, obviously you should be trusted as a business professional first. So, you'd think that they wouldn't even be coming to a real estate agent if they weren't those three things, right? If they didn't have the money, the motivation, and the urgency to get that done. But what does the conversation look like, or at what point do you kind of determine that with your potential buyers?
So just so the audience is clear, you'll get people that will come and see you that have money and motivation, no urgency. You'll get people come and see you that's got money and urgency, or I'm sorry, they've got urgency and motivation, but they've got no money. So I personally
Right.
teach what I did, so I know that it works. You see, I kind of bring a unique perspective to this, Andrew, because I sold real estate for 10 years before I became a trainer or speaker.
Right.
So I've always said that I'm not necessarily the best speaker in the industry. There's more people more eloquent than me. But if you're looking for someone who's been there, done that, and knows how you feel, then that's me. In fact, 5 years ago, I had to come off the road for a couple of years, and I reinstated my real estate license for a couple of years, just because it'd been 20 years since I sold a house to the general public. I was out training lots of realtors, but I hadn't sold to the general public. And when my wife said to me, she said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I think I'm going to reinstate my real estate license for a year, maybe two. I want to feel what my customers feel again." I mean, the industry's changed over the last 25 years. So literally, I reinstated my real estate license, and within 16, 18 months, RE/MAX put me into their Worldwide Hall of Fame. So, and that was just in the last few years. So what I'm sharing with you is today. It's what the agents need to hear today. So where do you do that? Well, personally, I'm a big believer in that. When you're working with a buyer, the first thing you have to do is you have to have the buyer come into your office and meet with you. Now, a lot of agents don't do that today, but I'm a big believer in they have to come into the office, and you take a few minutes with them, maybe a half hour to an hour, depends on, have a cup of coffee, let them ask you a few questions, you ask them a few questions, Now, when I was first licensed, we were taught how to pre-approve people, for financing, the GDS
Right.
ratios, GDS ratios, and all of that. With pre-approvals done today, sometimes the agents don't want to go in that deep. So what I would do is I would have a mortgage broker, someone that while they're sitting there with you, you can almost get the person on the phone and try to get them pre-approved before you take them. They got to be pre-approved before you put them in the car. The rest of the conversation
Right.
is about motivation and urgency.
All right. I love that. I love that. And Mark, REDX here. We sell leads, we promote prospecting, we
Yeah.
promote lead generation. You said, goal number one, you need to take a listing a week.
Yeah.
How would you advise agents to work prospecting into this formula for success?
Right.
And do you have any strategies or any lead types that you recommend or that you prefer and tell agents to work with?
I do. Now, Andrew, that question to a certain degree is loaded. And the reason I say that is because the right answer would be depending on where you are in your career, is the type of advice I would give you.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Sure.
for example,
Well,
if
let's break
you
it down:
are
new agents and then experienced agents.
okay. So for example, if you were an experienced agent and you've kept your database up to date, up to speed, you may be working more off a referral and relationship-based business. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't buy into
Right.
into the REDX system. And when leads come in, you handle them. You're experienced. I mean, any experienced realtor will tell you, the more leads you get wherever you get them from, the better the day is. And according to the National Association of Realtors, only about 20% of customers use the same realtor twice. So we were just going to count on referral and relationship-based selling. I think we got a problem. But if you're experienced, that's certainly a big part. If so, and then if you were brand new, you don't have a database to call on. So there's different techniques you might use for that. So let me maybe say it to you this way. How do you generate more leads? I would focus on 5 areas, and I would do these 3 things. The 5 areas I would focus on is you want to stay in touch with your past customers. That's very, very important. Salespeople have to understand the true value of a relationship. And it's something that I coined a phrase a few years ago called social capital. Social being, society and the relationships we have in it. Capital would be the true value of those relationships. So if NAR is correct that the average family moves 6 to 7 times in their lifetime, let's just assume it's 5. But according to studies I read, I think it was 6 or 7. So if they move 5 times, and if the average commission for you is 10 grand, that means every relationship you have is potentially worth $50,000, if not more. Now, the true profit on that relationship, it doesn't come from the first deal you do. That's one of the challenges in the real estate industry. We're very good at doing one deal here and one deal there with people. But where the true profit comes in is deals 3, 4, and 5, because they're calling you back.
Right.
So you got to treat those customers special. I don't care how much money you make or what your background is. I don't care if you came from government housing and now you're making $1 million a year. That doesn't impress me. What impresses me is how you treat the person, whether they're trying to get out of government housing themselves or whether they're buying a $5 million house. It doesn't matter to me. Everyone should be treated equal. I think that's very important. Very, very important. Customer service is so, I can't tell you how much business I've gotten just because the guy said, I've never got service like that before. You want to make sure your personal relationships and professional relationships, you have to remind them constantly who you are and what you do. You want to get involved with your community, Rotary Club, Lions Club, etc. You want to give back and be appreciated within the community, that you're the type of person that does give back. And then the fifth area is you got to work some form of lead generation system. Now, if you were experienced, you might go back to what I would call passive forms of lead generation. That could be e-newsletters, sending out snail mail to past customers. If you've got cash flow, maybe you buy some billboards, do some direct mailers. But in other words, we're doing things that we're hoping people call us, if that makes sense to you. So it's passive. We do something, we hope they call us. Then you've got proactive, where proactive would be could be used if you're in a slump and you want to get yourself out of a slump. It could be you're a new agent and cash flow's low, and or you're a newer agent, you don't have a big database. It could be just that some of your lead generation stuff you've been doing, you're just not paying off right now. I mean, it will maybe tomorrow, the day after, but today it's not. So your proactive approach would be calling your FSBOs, your expireds, just listed, just sold, etc. I mean, that's where REDX comes in. One thing I loved about REDX is that it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it for salespeople. And it doesn't matter what program I teach. I've always said to salespeople, one of the first things you do every day is you work your FSBOs and expireds. Because let's face it, the FSBO got a sign on the front lawn saying, I want to sell my house. And the expired obviously wanted to sell their house. They just hired the wrong person. So if the FSBO and expireds don't generate your business, then you might, if you just listen to property, you call the neighborhood around. Or you could door knock the neighborhood. Just sold, same idea. Open houses. Right down to, if none of that's working, then find yourself a scrubbed list to make sure that you adhere to the do not call laws, and start cold calling. And I guarantee you that if you understand the dialogue and the process for a cold call, you can sit down at your desk, and every day before the end of the workday, you'll find someone that wants to sell their house. How do I know that? I just did it in my town. No one knew who Mark Leader was as a realtor because I might have lived here for 20 years, but my business was out of town, except for the odd person at the hockey rink where my kids were on a hockey team. You stand and talk to the same father each week while you're having a cup of coffee. Nobody in town knew Mark Leader as a realtor. So in order to relaunch my career, the first thing I did was I scrubbed the list and started making calls, started using REDX, stuff like that, until I built the database. And then you've got this thing called, so that's passive, and then you've got proactive. Now you've got this thing today called hyperactive, at least that's what I call it. And when we're talking about hyperactive, you can buy leads, because it's basically hyperactive is all based on online lead generation. You can buy leads.
Right.
You can come up and try and write the ads for FSBOs and expireds, write the ads for, call me to list your house, or call me to sell your house, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. But I tell you, that's not real easy. One of the things, Andrew, I don't think I shared with you, I probably should have. A couple of years ago, I got involved with an online lead gen company. So they asked me to do some consulting with them because they were very good techie guys, but they didn't necessarily understand the real estate industry. So I was able to, not necessarily get under the where it's the programming, but I really got to get deep as far as the customers go with online lead gen. And here's the thing with online lead gen is that, like anything else, you have to specialize in something. And in order for you to get a true return on online lead gen, it's kind of like a three-legged stool. You got to design the ad so it's catchy. You got to use words which create call to action. And a lot of people think that's the two things, the old AIDA principle, attention, interest, desire, action, right? But the truth is, when it comes to online lead generation, there's a third leg to that stool. And that's these key words that you use in the background. See, that's where the real genius comes. And that's not something, when I say genius, I mean genius. I mean, there's people that are going to university now for computer sciences, and they're teaching these key words. Because if your keywords in the background's not correct, your cost per lead is too high. And if your cost per lead's too high, then your return on investment's too low. So personally,
right.
people can't design their own ads and pay Zuckerberg the money that made him a billionaire or whatever the case may be. But personally, I would hire someone who specializes in that.
Right.
I would hire somebody who specializes in that, because again, it's not just creating a pretty ad with some pretty words. It's behind the scenes that really counts. So the reason I tagged that hyperactive, because your online lead generation is working 24/7. You know, when I first started in the business, it was not quite like this, but it was almost banker hours, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, do your open houses Saturdays. And believe it or not, in some parts of North America, there was a law called the Lord's Day Act, and you weren't allowed to sell houses on a Sunday. I mean, that's, agents just changed the date on the deal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but that's a true story. So they would just date the contract for yesterday or tomorrow, because it was called the Lord's Day Act. They've changed that now. But the nice thing about online lead generation is that if you're new in the business, or companies like REDX, you're filling your pipeline. And when it's said and done, real estate is about playing the law of averages, Andrew. That's really what it is. That's what sales is. It's the law of averages. No one bats 1,000. You know, I'm a Canadian, so I'm more into hockey than baseball. But I think that if you batted a 400 average, they'd probably put you in the Hall of Fame. Is that not fair to say? Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, maybe even a 320, 325 might get you to the Hall of Fame. So let's say it's 400. The math is easy. That means there's 600 other pitches that came at you that you swung out.
Right.
So even baseball players, hockey players, you know, it's Wayne Gretzky coined the phrase. You know, what was it? So something like I missed the opportunity to score a goal every time I didn't make a shot, or something like that. You know, just dump it to the net, dump it to the net, dump it to the net. Something will stick. And if you go into the business world, you look at the two most expensive commercial leasing locations in North America, at least it was a few years ago. It was Times Square in Manhattan, and it was Yorkdale Shopping Center in Toronto, Ontario. Why Times Square? It's purely because of the population that goes by the doors. That's why. That's the more population that drives by your storefront, the higher the cost per rent. So when it comes to real estate, it's all about playing the law of averages. So going back to your original question, what is the best form of lead generation? Well, first and foremost, of course, out of respect, REDX, I would definitely do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and anyone who knows me knows that it's been in every one of my programs for the last 15 years. But it doesn't necessarily. There's not a bad form of lead generation or prospecting. There's just bad prospectors. In other words, they're happy they want to get the leads, but they don't want to work to get the leads. So it really breaks down to two things today. You've got lead generation and lead conversion. So you have to be strong at lead generating in order to get the conversion rate to get on the listing boards. That was a long answer.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that's a great answer, Mark. I think we're running a little bit short on time here, but gosh, we packed so much into the last 34 minutes here. And to kind of, reiterate what you said at the beginning of the podcast here, a lot of coaches, a lot of agents make it more complicated than it needs to be. If they can take, and if you're ready to pack everything 30 minutes, it really is that simple, right? So my advice to agents is revisit this podcast, go watch it again, listen to it again, take Mark's advice. It doesn't have to be that complicated as you know your lookers from your buyers and take proactive, hyperactive approaches to lead generation, to real estate, and to helping people buy and sell homes. So, Mark, thank you so much. Is there where can people find you? This is your opportunity to let them know about what you offer, some of your coaching and training. Where can they find you if they want to hear more from you?
Okay. Well, my website's markleader.com. Pretty simple.
Okay.
The services that we offer is we have coaching. I've got some great coaches. I got some really great coaches.
Nice.
And we offer training programs. I've got my 9-week space training program, and then the new listing formula workshop, which has taken on a life of its own. I'm going to be in Atlanta in a couple of weeks for that. Another one in Ottawa, another one in Toronto, one in Miami, and one in Alabama, I think. Or if you're looking for a speaker for a conference or a convention, I've done over 2,000. I'm 2,300, I think. So we're kind of a full service training company here, not just coaching, training, coaching, speaking. 40 years experience.
Awesome.
If I don't share it with people, what's it worth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for sharing some of your experience with us today. We're going to have you back because I think there's a lot more we can get into, and a lot more that we can share with our audience here. So, Mark, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us today, sharing your expertise. To our audience, go check out markleader.com. Check out some of his resources, his coaching, his training. If you or your team or your brokerage, wants to book him as a speaker, check that out. And then, as always, we go live every Thursday at 1:30 Mountain Time. So join us next week. And until then, we hope you have a great evening and a great week. Thanks again, Mark. We'll see you later.
Thank you for having me. Have a great one.
You bet.